I think a good place to start is the fact that both Dr. J and Dr. Puleng work in a space where there's an intersection between AI and humanity. And I kind of wanted to just start off by asking you both kind of how your interest in this topic first came about, why you thought it was important to look into, and how that has changed from when you first started studying that to kind of what it's become now and what it means now. So either of you can go for it and you can bounce off of each other.
You can start, Puleng.
Oh, okay. I was hoping you can start so that I copy from you. Hi, everybody. Such a delight to be here. My journey is interesting because I started off very young, very excited about computers and technology. I first enrolled in a degree in computer science in 1996. My dad said to me, "So what are you going to study now that you're good with mathematics?" I'm like, "I don't know." It's like, "Try computer science, you'll have a good pension fund." And I was like, "Oh, okay, I'll have a job and eventually a pension fund. Great. What's computer science?" He's like, "I don't know, you'll find out when you get to varsity." That was my story. And I graduated in the year 2000 and I lived in Lesotho at the time, very excited about introducing websites, payroll system, HR systems, building them for different corporates, government. We built the first Lesotho's website and central banks' websites and so on and so forth, and also payroll systems and HR systems. So loved working with computers. I used to say my computers do everything that I tell them to do. I don't like humans. I don't want to work with humans. Computers obey me. I sit there, I program, it does exactly what I ask it to program. Little did I know, a couple of years later, 2007, I had been working for 7 years in corporate, then in government, and now I was working for the University of Cape Town. And I decided to enroll in an MBA, and I encountered the subject of creativity. Changed my life totally. And I felt like I actually want to be more in human development work than behind a computer. So there started my whole new journey of wanting to do more with humans and less with computers. So studied in that space, and even my PhD was sort of directed in that space, application of creativity in the space of project management and in corporate. And in 2015, total change of careers to explore more of human development and coaching. And this is what I do now.
You know, I also loved technology. And because I stuttered, I was exempt from doing any public speeches. I didn't have to do anything ever. So imagine how amazing it was to go through all of that and believing that tech is going to solve all of the world's problems. By the time I got to the 90s and I started my postgrad journey, imagine my surprise when I woke up one day and realized, oh dear, there's a human in the system. And this thing doesn't do what it's supposed to do. If there's an if statement, it ignores it. It does its own thing. Everything is about how it feels in a moment or what it thinks it's going to be doing next. And it says one thing and does another. It really intrigued me that none of the humanities actually have it figured out. We attempt to figure things out. We attempt to shape the story about how we see humans. And I started initially on human learning and understanding computer-related learning. So that means machine learning and artificial intelligence, what I've been involved in most of my working life. And that's how we met. Is like, you know, Puleng has got this ability to, or maybe I could just tell the story briefly. So I met Puleng briefly, and I was typically known as the innovation guy. I did a lot of innovation work in my previous life, and because nobody wanted to hear about AI, we just spoke about inventions in technology, and then you can talk about intelligence. Yeah. But she bring an executive group together in a room, and they stand in a circle, and she gets him to participate in activities beyond what I ever even thought was possible. And it wasn't just that it was possible with this crowd, but the way that they shaped their personalities in this conversation. And the way that they had to sit down and stand up and do things and engage with each other, that is a truly humanistic kind of element, is that even if you had a technological tool and you had everybody staring at a screen, you would never be able to get that feel of how humans really react when they take a contextual view of another being. Human intelligence is about context, looking at somebody and getting a feel for what they're thinking or feeling or doing, rather than just saying, I'm going to write the program that's going to tell you what to do. So there's this dichotomy, isn't it?
Absolutely, very interesting.
Great for those intros. I think that leads us well into the crux of what we're talking about today. So this term's concept of human in the loop has kind of been defined broadly as a process that integrates human oversight into automated systems. But I think there's probably a lot more nuance to that, and I'd like you both to talk to that a bit. What do you think human in the loop means or should mean?
All right. So would you like me to go first again, Dr. J?
You want me to go first? I'll go first.
You go first, yeah.
So I've got a story that I love to tell, and I think maybe some people have heard it, but maybe I should just tell it again. For me, the way that I make sense of any human that engages with technological tooling, intelligent or otherwise. If you operate a piece of machinery, and let's say that that machinery that you operate is your motor car, you operate it in a way that you have been taught, you have been tested, you carry a license to drive it. So because humans make mistakes and behave erratically, there's an enforcement system to check that you're doing what you're supposed to do. As you drive down a freeway, you have to make the decision as to human as to how you apply your senses. So you look in the distance, you see there's a signboard, and the signboard says 55. You look at your dashboard, you know, like in the one pie chart on your dashboard is probably the most important, the speed. And today you feel lucky. And you apply pressure to the accelerator and you do 80 down a freeway. And if any consequence plays out, you are utterly and totally accountable, because the decision that the human took in operating its machinery that resulted in an outcome that was checked by people who are paid to check that you do what you're supposed to do, there are various humans in that loop deciding what it is that you need to do and how you're going to be doing that constantly. But if you operate a piece of machinery where the purpose is set, and let's say I drive in a self-drive car, and I say to the self-drive car, I want to get you from my house to the pub or to the university or to whatever the destination is, and I want you to get there as quickly as possible. I don't care how you do it, but do it within the legal constraints of the rules of the road. It will try to find the shortest possible path through the back roads, get you there on time. Or you say, I want the scenic route, and it'll take you a different place, you know, to get to the end point. And the decision that you took was to decide on the intent, but not on the steps and the actions that you had to take. So the human in the loop between, I guess, in these various ways of thinking about it, can be very mechanical, very decision-oriented. And on the other end, where most people want to end up is wanting to get to an intent. I want to just be able to tell my AI to go do something for me, and I want it to understand me and just go and execute it, so that the decisions that are made, the hundreds of those, are then made by machinery. So the human doesn't necessarily know exactly where it fits. It figures it out as it goes. Because some people, like I've got a good friend who really loves a self-drive car algorithm. He hates driving. I like driving. So I like driving the motor car. I like to operate it. I like to see how quickly I can go around a corner from time to time, and those kind of things that the self-drive algorithm is definitely not interested in. So maybe that's kind of a context for me.
Love it. Absolutely love it, Dr. J. I just also want to build on that with another perspective, which is, let's think about all things designed or created. Is there anything that is not created for humans? I wonder if there's anything that doesn't have a human
Recipient.
as a recipient of whatever it is that was created. I understand also human in the loop as such a deep understanding that there's always a human. It doesn't matter how much we can build algorithms, there's always a human that is being served at the end of the system. So trying to weave in that context of humanity throughout without getting too excited around the technology in itself. It's there to serve this human. So make sure you wire in the human in the loop throughout.
We had to take a quick question on the design thinking view. Sometimes what you want to do is have a view that if I'm going to deal with a certain problem set and I figure out the capability within a certain solution space, you might have something that's going to automate, but unless there's something positive to some human at the end, what's the purpose of it existing in the first place?
Exactly.
Yeah, I definitely get that.
In fact, now that you mentioned design thinking, which is my area of study that intrigued me when I started to pursue studies around humans, it was the only process that, compared to all the other processes, we were in a conference, creativity conference in New York together, just looking at all these processes and wondering. Every process has this in common. It's a problem solving. You identify a problem, you solve for the problem, you come up with a solution, you implement it, you test it, and so on. Design thinking was the only process that started with empathy.
Yes.
Empathy. Try to design something, trying to create something. It doesn't matter what we are creating. And then you are saying we should start with empathy. Why? Who cares about empathy? We have the technology, the knowledge, the world, and how it works. Why should we be empathizing? It forces you to find the human in the system and then bring that human in the system throughout your design process.
And I remember when you and I discussed this some years ago, because I've been quite deliberately sometimes trying to think about empathizing around a certain situation and realize this absolutely, because the challenge is that even if we reflect on what another human is doing, there was a time where we just didn't care at all. It was purely around, let me think about what the outcome is of what I produce in my business, and let me go find a target market, and let me look at everybody in that market as a collective and try and understand the common persona where everybody looks exactly the same, and then just trying to take what I have and push it into that community. But as soon as you empathize and you immerse, it's very tough. You might see the nuances of the situation that under normal circumstances are not visible. And that's why I quite like the way that some of the research we've been doing is trying to find better algorithms to behave like it is immersing itself in your life. And if I can immerse myself, the meaning that I understand the things that are novel to you, what happiness means to you, what sadness is, what discourse means, and can I adjust what I do dynamically based on those situations in an empathetic manner? Yeah, I like that.
And I like your use of the word immerse, because it's very different from just observe from a distance, coming in with your own assumptions and doing it superficially. Immerse is a very different, powerful verb there that you used here.
And I think, what happened with me when I started in the humanities, although I'm still very much an amateur, but the very first lecture, I'll never forget this. I was sitting in Pittsburgh, Carnegie Mellon, and we were talking about ideographic and normathetic research methods. The only way that you're going to understand a human system is if you go and experience it. How do you remove your biases, your preferences, your understanding of what's going on in that space, and then trying to form an opinion? And I think what happens in a lot of the social sciences is that it is entirely opinion driven. And I think that's sometimes the consequence. And that's why in computational social science, if you can construct an approach that says that I can figure out what the actual data points are that are important to that collective, I can then drive my intelligence around those points rather than having to worry about figuring out exactly what the social situation is, especially if I do a deep dive in a certain social situation.
I love it. Absolutely love it.
So I wanted to jump back to one of the points that Puleng mentioned about empathy and how design thinking leads with a very innately human ability. And I also want to bring in AI agents and kind of how, because humans have been automating tasks throughout history. We've invented things to take over mundane tasks, and now AI is taking over certain cognitive tasks of human beings, but not aspects like empathy and ones that are inherently tied to emotion. And I would personally like to think that by incorporating AI agents that can take over kind of more right brainy aspects of life, that we can bring out the more left brainy side of things and be even more human than we were before. But part of me also thinks that's naive and would require people to have a lot more knowledge about how using AI actually affects their cognition and affects the very human part of themselves that should be brought out. So yeah, if either of you could share something on that.
Nicola, I do want to share something on that. I was invited to a conference in 2019 in Amsterdam at a design thinking conference. The theme was empathy. And they said, come and give your African perspective on what empathy is. And, there I was very prepared, extracting everything I know from my thesis plus the experiences, what Jay talked about my work and how it ignites the human. You can feel the humans in my workshops every single day. And I was very excited to create that human experience. And I did. Everybody stood up, find another person. I said, in Africa, before we engage with each other, we have eye connection and then we greet each other. My grandmother would never allow me to just come in and say, Granny, this and that, hello in our language and how are you? And if you translate all these languages, it's things like, which means, where are you? And you have to say, "Kiteng," meaning I'm present. And then only then we engage, which means we see each other. We don't engage with each other until we've greeted each other here in our continent. And that greeting is sort of a way of bringing that humanity first before we can connect about anything. My session was really powerful. People were like teary and beautiful, and they stood up, found each other, and so on. Guess what? After me was a speaker from the United States, a professor whose topic was they're building systems that will be more empathetic than humans. She was showing us all elements of how they are building systems. This is way back in 2019. And I was like, oh my goodness, yes, a computer can be more empathetic than a human being. She challenged me so much with her talk. I remember coming back to South Africa, and because I work a lot with banks and insurance industries, I remember saying to insurance companies that, guys, my parents have died, so I can say this. When your mom has died in South Africa, a human being, when you call insurance company and a human being on the other side says, hello, your mom has died, fill in a form like this. And remember to send a death certificate. Bye. That's it. Right? That's the experience, and that's it. And that money might not come through at the right time for the funeral. It doesn't matter. They're not concerned. And I said, I would rather have a computer on the other side, a robotic on the other side that will find information first, even before I inform them, using big data AI. Hello, we're so sorry. This is AI. We heard about the death of your mother. We understand your culture too. We know that tonight there'll be prayer meetings and you're expected to serve some drinks and cakes. We have already deposited 5,000 into your account to cater for that. And we're already working on transferring funeral monies into your account. We know in your culture you do big funerals. We're very sorry. And as I drop the phone, flowers come through the door. So I asked, what would you rather have? And where was more empathy? Dr. J?
You know my answer. I think the human role sometimes is totally overrated, especially when it comes to trying to find a way that they connect with especially the example you use now. Exactly. No, I get that. And I think that what is interesting, I've been testing the differences in models as part of our agentic journey. And it's maybe worth looking at this at some point. If you use Anthropic, or some of the models from France, they deliberately designed the final layer of the model so that the chat interface is not designed to be friendly, but to be functional. So that means if you say to it, hey, how are you? It comes back and say, can I help you? It's very direct. It's very explicit. OpenAI GPT-4 compared to 5 is very different. Even the various versions of 4 all behave slightly differently as they're trying to grapple with this way in which cultures deal with just saying hi. But if you use Llama from Meta, the models were mostly trained on conversational related interactions. So that means chats and the like. If you just say to it, hi, it'll ask you, hey, how are you? Great day. Is there anything I can assist you with today? It almost creates maybe a false sense, but it is happy. It's got a happy tone, and you immediately feel inviting. And I think because we love to see, especially conversational agents, we want to almost see it like a human, because if something can be conversationally useful, we think it must be like us. And exactly like you're saying, how does it detect that context? In some cultures, we can just look at somebody, and it's like when you greet somebody or when you hug somebody, there's a sense of understanding of that contextual engagement. But in AI, you don't have that. And that's why I think it's a lot of development still needed to figure out how that's going to work in the future. Yeah, no, I get that. I love that story.
Absolutely. And like you were saying, how I don't know if we can ever really even codify humanity. So I work a lot with these international people. And then sometimes we'll have a project here in Africa, and then they will come, we deliver a project, and then they say, Puleng, for when we give a person, let's say 2 minutes to speak, we work with scientists, right? And we give them 2 minutes to speak. Sometimes they can go on forever, and we are time bound. Our sessions are very much about making sure that we account for every second. So do you know what we do? When a person goes over, when we get closer to the 2 minutes, we start moving towards that person. So we position it at the beginning that if we go over 2 minutes, you're going to get a hug from the facilitator. And so people, the minute you start moving towards them, they are very stiff scientists. The minute you start moving towards, like, oh, no, okay, I'm done. 2 minutes is over.
I'm going to take that and use it. I promise you.
It went differently, the opposite way. They want to speak over because they wanted a hug.
Yes, I get it.
They achieved the exact opposite. So we tell them, once you get closer to 2 minutes, you'll see us walking up the stage, and if you don't finish by 2 minutes, we're going to give you a hug. And then people stay like, oh, great, I want a hug. Can never codify human systems. Very different.
And I think that's the interesting thing about what makes human nature difficult to codify as well, is that if you think about it, we're like an ever-evolving biological system on our way to an end. We've been able to fix many things as humans and create all kinds of solutions, but we've not been able to figure out how to get out of death. So that means that every single day you wake up that it's coming, and you have a natural forgetfulness function. Your natural forgetfulness function says, well, I'm going to ignore the things that bug me. But some people can't. They might get fixated on something that might happen, and might be a life situation or whatever it might be. And I think that you don't know what's going to get that human to think about that situation in that moment, in that day, under those conditions. Wherein, even if you use randomization in AI models, you can still get a fair understanding of how the latent space is generating some kind of random output, and it's linked to its input, where humans, I don't know all your inputs. I don't know what has created you at that moment in time, in that stage of your life, in that particular situation. And that's like you were saying, if you think about banks and insurance and telcos, media companies, and anybody who deals with a faceless human as a customer or as a consumer, you never get to see the people. You have to infer some kind of life situation. And that means if we can get technological inventions, especially like we've been working on this thing called ecogentic, can we get an ecogentic journey where it can attach itself to your persona and let that persona be you, not a person that looks like that with gray hair, who's that age, who's got this bank account, whatever it is. If you remove the mechanics and you understand the person's behaviors, is that possible? So that's why I think that the ultimate kind of human in the loop will be a human calibrating an AI to behave more like a human, to be able to behave more like an AI. That creates an interesting kind of reinforcing loop.
Exactly. And to an extent, perhaps our gadgets are harnessing all of that intelligence in being that close to the way that we are reacting, that we are manifesting, that we are showing up. Someone said, our phones know us more than we know ourselves. Here's already a system with us that's harnessing all of that wisdom about an individual. Can we extract all of this information and serve this individual in real time, in that context, harness all of that insight?
Yeah.
That's where we are going with this.
The story we've been trying to kind of find a way to articulate more better or well is that kind of in three pillars. We see on the one end, what is the role of the human if I want to find the details? If I just want to get your identity, I want to know your domicile, I want to know some details about you. It's very mechanical, it's very factual, It is something that is very accurate. It is precise within its context. And you don't need a very clever intelligence to collect that from you. It just means that you need to obtain those details. But by the time I get to a point where I want to approximate anything, I want to calculate or find an approach or use an algorithm. So that means kind of like a predefined recipe of some sort that's going to predict if you are going to buy my product, or if you are going to default on my loan, or if you are going to go through a certain life situation as the next action. Now I need to have a different approach, because if I'm going to predict that based on the data I collected from you, you are going to get yourself in financial trouble, do I only let the machine in the system do the work, or do I let the human in the loop do the work? That's the decision that companies are grappling with, because economies of scope versus economies of scale creates a complex pressure point. At scale, you cannot serve people. It's too costly. You cannot have more employees to serve it. But if I do scope and I want to solve a particular problem for you, and I know, like you were saying earlier, now that can be thinking about a certain situation, then it's going to be far more effective. That's why by the time we get to the generative world, it's just linguistic. So it's almost like you need to combine the world of linguistics and of generative capabilities with approximations, with accurate and precise capabilities. And all of those together is kind of creating a new industrial revolution. It's a new way of thinking of what the purpose of the work we're getting involved in actually is. Because if you think about it, I mean, you've been working in banks. Think about how many thousands of people work there that are purely there because of the inefficiencies of the system. So by the time you rethink it, at the core of it, banks buy money from one source and selling it at a profit. That's, so do you need so many humans in that system to control it and to check it? So yeah, it does create complexity.
There's another project that was conceived in one of my classes in the insurance industry. In fact, we had quite an intense design thinking journey, maybe around 6 months. So this particular group says, wait a minute, how much information are we collecting by just having these individuals as a client? Because we are both in partnership with banks as an insurance company, we're one company. Through our bank, we can access what they are spending. Through insurance, we can access health information. Through the accounts, we can access where they are financially and so on. And then we have records about their families. They have really all the important information that can help the individual make better decisions for themselves based on this information they have gathered. So they made an example to say, supposing your health information is telling us that you have a certain disease, then we see your spending habits every single day. You are buying this and that and that and that. That is that is detrimental to your health profile. And we have access to this and that about your work, and we are aware of your stress levels. So harnessing all of that information and then being able to present you options on a daily basis, not to wait until things are really bad and then say, stop that. But on a day-to-day basis, we actually can harvest enough insights to help the individual to make decisions. But, we're going into territories there that I wonder, Dr. J, in your work, how does that play out? We know there's papaya and all of this, but how does that play out?
Well, I think the unfortunate consequence of humans in the system in corporate settings is called regulation. But when you think about it, the reason why we regulate industries is because we're basically defending one group of people against the bad that another group of people might or potentially can get involved in. So that means that if I had access to your medical records, you're not allowed to use it in the context of the regulatory frameworks globally. I can't take your medical record and decide not to give you a financial loan unless the financial loan is designed in such a way, depending on your lifespan. You can't get a mortgage when you're 60, the same way you can't get a mortgage when you're 18, unless you have the financial means, obviously, in both those situations. But if you're going to want to get a loan from a bank, the evidence that it's going to use would be related to what it collected from you. And at the moment, I think how a lot of industries are organized is that you need an externalized party or an externalized approach to get you to opt in to provide that data to the provider. So if you think about wellness programs and those environments where you opt into a benefit system that can use that data to make a decision about your medical and your financial or your drive or whatever the situation is. So I think it does create a sense of complexity.
Or also to help, I mean, even if it doesn't make decision for you, could it help you to make decisions?
Yeah, and I think that think about South African organization Discovery, like Vitality, or one of those kind of instruments. It's designed on the back of a behavioral chassis, and the behavioral chassis only exists, and the scores assigned to you exist because you decide to play the game. So it's kind of and I think this is the thing that we're always trying to think about in the context of any AI journey, is that you first have to know the game, you have to know the players, you have to know what winning and losing looks like. Once you know what winning and losing look like, you also then need to know the rules of the game and the parties who play the game to get to a winning outcome. Hundreds or thousands or millions of permutations might play out in moves that can be taken to get to a winning state. So I think the challenge with, if you take your example with a medical condition, plus the way that you conduct yourself on the road in driving and the way you conduct your finances, how many possible permutations are there across all of those environments that will then give you a score or some way in which you can make it encoded that I can compare, let's say, Puleng with Jay. And how do you then know that if one person's risk is higher than the other, what would it mean to me if I influence you positively or negatively in the context of the actions that you're going to take next? I think in our world, we've got interaction sciences and some research we've been doing around understanding how humans engage with systems, and systems meaning if I do USSD on a feature phone, or I'm on a web page on my screen, or I'm on a mobile phone that is a smartphone, or I'm standing in front of an agent inside a branch, or I phone a call center, any of the touch points humans engage with you on, the idea is that can you create an intelligence that has collected enough bits of evidence, bring those dimensions together, and get the humans who act on your behalf, let's say your employees, to then act intelligently. Because in many cases, there's this example that if you phone a bank and you want to decide if you want to, let's say you want to take a loan to do some traveling, or you want to extend your home, whatever it might be, and you want to open up another credit card, what they first have to do is collect all the evidence from you before they decide. What should happen is that they should already take the evidence they have and present to you. And that's what it doesn't always happen. So you need a social construct, a personality, a way in which you can reliably score people without looking at just the drivers of your business, about how the people that participate well in the things that you provide give you upside and them upside. What does that look like? Personality design is an important part of the story.
I think it's interesting because at the moment, the way AI looks and the way that humans are using AI, it looks a lot like a human sitting behind a computer, putting an input into AI, AI spits out an output, the work is done. But how you're speaking about it kind of sounds like it would be the reverse. The AI would do its work, would produce an output, the human would still do more work on the output in uniquely human ways, and that is kind of like the final product. But I think maybe we can talk a little bit about how are humans using AI at the moment, and how is that becoming detrimental? Is it? And how can we stop it from becoming detrimental?
Absolutely. Dr. J, I was looking at the time and thinking, we got to touch on that, and we have very little time. It's a big topic. This morning, I read an article on LinkedIn about how AI is rewiring humans. It's an MIT study. I asked them to send me the source. They haven't yet sent me. MIT study that shows I wish I could even play it back. That shows the difference in the brain. They did a brain scan of people who use AI, at first glance and don't apply their thinking anymore, to people who are using AI. Yeah. So this is what they showed. Let me share a specific LinkedIn. Here it is. Let me know if you see it this time.
Yes.
Yes. So this is a recent study. They are saying MIT studied how after 4 months of people who used AI, how their brains looked like, saying 83% of ChatGPT users could not recall a single sentence that they'd written. People writing without AI remembered fine. 47% decrease in brain connectivity in ChatGPT users, and 3% less learning, 33% decrease in mental effort that leads to learning. So then this is the brains that they are showing, that this is the ChatGPT user and this is the non-ChatGPT user.
I think that's exactly the thing, isn't it? Your frontal lobes are the parts of your brain that connect to your hands that help you to deal with the internalization of a lot of your learning processes. If you don't use it and all the answers are being given to you continuously without going through thinking, it does change everything. But what I'm postulating at the moment is that because most humans go through a cycle where as soon as they get access to a tool that's going to do a certain amount of work, they attempt to find places where they are good at that's not in the space of the tool. So it's a bit like, if you think of an early industrial revolution, the concept of steam, say. If you use steam to move this massive arm to get the water from the river up into your factory, and you then have a machine that does the textile and does the sewing for you, it was no point for you to compete on sewing. If you did a brain scan, you might have seen that your sewing skills would go to nothing because that bit of intelligence is taken care of for you. So I'm relying on human intuition and the human genetic system to go find the next frontier now that it's conquered this one. You cannot ignore the tooling of the day. You cannot ignore the invention of the day. You almost need to embrace it, but you don't want to stop. And that's why I quite like that study. I've actually read that too. I've got a different one from UCLA as well that was done with Dr. Cohen on a brain scan. Not quite as detailed, but it was around cognitive preferences, around people getting decision traps. So that means they're not willing to make a decision unless they check with an AI.
Yeah.
And the problem is then now you sit with some kind of decision dependency on an external tool. So where do you then take your cognition? It's a bit like kids with media, passive media versus active media. It's a bit like putting kids in front of games or trying to program them to think in a certain way. What you rather want to do is go back to first principle, wire the brain to understand first principle, and let it go and conquer what it needs to conquer. And I'm relying on maybe humans coming out of this going, well, we're going to need this intelligence. It's going to do its job, but where's my next frontier?
That is it. That is it. Dr. J, we are completely in agreement there. So as somebody who started my career building these algorithms and decided to shift into human development, I did worry at some point way back 15, 18 years back and thought, in fact, my very first school project maybe in second year in 1998 was an expert system. And I was like, oh, right, now these computers are becoming experts. We are literally building algorithms to make them experts. So what are experts supposed to do now? Over the years, as I studied this, saw the move towards artificial intelligence even before it became so popular. I thought, okay, this is a whole new revolution. People are not even aware of that. It was a very few of us who were aware of this maybe 10, 15 years back. And we could see that this thing is going to literally do so much more. Here was my excitement as somebody who was studying a PhD thesis in people tapping into their creative intelligence more and building their creative intelligence, building their ability to think, to be divergent. Yes, let all the mechanistic stuff be done by computers so that people can apply more of their executive function, activate their prefrontal cortex and make better decisions. For me, it was so exciting. And that has been sort of my viewpoint when it comes to this debate. This is actually going to elevate our human experience to be thinkers, more creative, to make more connections. If we use it right, I have been very concerned because I think people are using it the wrong way. And I think there was never really any platforms to teach people how to use this in a way that elevates your thinking. So I worry when an executive calls me and says, I just asked a question to another executive, and the default answer I received, I could tell he went into ChatGPT, cut and pasted my email, and cut and pasted back the email to me. Because in the response, it's not even things that we do in this organization. There is no thinking and applying of heart, gut, intuition, creativity, imagination anymore. It's just like this.
Yeah.
So that's the part that I think, I don't know how we are. You remember, Dr. J, we ran a conference a couple of years back, maybe 4 years back, because we could see this coming. And the title of our conference was Leveraging Humanity in the Age of AI. And you gave a powerful perspective where we were saying, can we tell people about this and how to apply it in a way that you don't rewire your brain to be lazy again, because the brain is lazy. And if you're going to rewire it to not think, it will be very happy not to think.
Yeah. But I think, isn't that the dichotomy, is that even though we know that, and if you think of our biological journey through our age, as we age, is that if you don't exercise the muscle, being the brain, you're going to get lazy. So you need to have an ability to put yourself in situations or create new ways of thinking that is not the way that it is today. And I think that's what people miss in the context of token generation or AI, that is mostly backward facing. It looks at a conceptual past. It takes a viewpoint of historical data with all of its conflicting views, and it then tries to produce an outcome based on how linguistically things fit together. None of the new AI companies were created by AI tools. It was first and foremost by a human saying, against all odds, against the face of risk, against the things that we think is going to work, I'm going to do it anyway. And then it became successful, not because it asks something based on some popular output. And I think that does create a lot of risk for people if they don't know how to use it properly. Very good point.
And again, Dr. J, our children, the education system, it would also be such injustice if we don't talk about that in this particular webinar. What do we do with the education system that encourages kids to use ChatGPT? My son asked me something and I said, I don't know why your teacher put this here. My daughter says, use ChatGPT. I'm like, ask ChatGPT what the teacher taught you in class.
That's not good. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've also got a view, I guess, like you, and that is that you should remove all tech from a kid's life until they get to a point where they can deal with their own emotional state and learning capabilities. So by the time they get to their teens, they're ready to think about things. And you don't want to contaminate them with the tech of the day when they're young. It's unfair to program them to believe that the world works in a certain way. You actually remove a lot of that interest that will come down the line. And especially if you think about interactive tech. But that's a different debate for a different day.
I think overall it's been a really well-rounded discussion. We've touched on a lot of different aspects. It was really great. I was really excited for the session and it did not disappoint. So thank you both, Dr. J and Dr. Puleng. We are hosting a technical session after this. If any of our listeners want to join that, we're going to be talking about dynamic and static models. So a little more hands-on. Thank you so much for a great session.
I always love talking to you. It's great.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. J. I learned so much from you all the time. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.